Here on the Creative Thinker Podcast, we discuss all theories, philosophy, and thought behind the creative process. And we hope that you find some inspiration along the way. Welcome, creative thinkers the world over. My name is Henry Moon, and I am your host, and I am joined today by Michael Vasquez. Once again, welcome back, Michael.
Thank you for having me back again.
Yeah, thanks for wearing the same hoodie.
It's cold.
I got the same one too. It's cool.
This is my go-to non-work hoodie.
Yeah, it's cold in the studio. You got to keep studios cold for some reason. I don't think I've ever been in a warm one.
I think you'd rather have it cold than warm. I think coming into a warm studio would be kind of icky.
You remember that the garage studio we had that I did photography in? Back in Elgin.
Oh, yeah.
That was like 110 degrees all day, every day. Anyway, sorry. Let's get to the point.
Going off track right from the beginning.
Right away.
And I'm sure the title's going to have some type of zombie thing in here.
Let's make this one explicit too. So we have zombies and when to use them today.
Yes.
So we're talking the literary device as well as the green flesh-eating brain machines.
Yes.
So we're going to break up our introductions of what zombies exactly are and what they refer to, because we both have a little bit different description, or at least a little bit different idea of what zombies are to us. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to kick it off real quick, and I'm going to kick it over to you.
Okay.
A lot of kicking in this show. It's like,
there we go.
It's like MMA. If you're not getting the video, you're missing out, because there's a lot of hand gestures and missed eye contact and a lot of really romantic moments in the studio.
Yeah,
so make sure you get that.
We're constantly keeping direct eye contact with each other the entire time.
I've had too much or not enough coffee. We'll blame it on that.
We're having fun.
Anyway, so zombies. let me kick off the ticking clock mechanism that is the zombie. Okay, so to me, I think in the modern world, what zombies can capture most effectively, and I know they've been around forever, and I, in my typical fashion, did not do enough research on the origin of zombies. However, what I think they do in our modern environment is they encapsulate this frustration that I'm sure I'm not the only one who has against the walls of society put there by other people, right? So whether that be, government or corporations, a 9-to-5 job, especially for artists, right? Like most of the artists I talk to hate their job. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, I hate my job.
Hate their 9-to-5 job, correct?
Correct. Just about any job, unless they find a way to make it creative, which you have. So I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about other people, ones listening.
I hear you.
So it's this railing against humanity as an idea, humanity as a group of people. And I think that's what zombies kick off inside us, is that we see other people too often, quite frankly. There's not enough empathy towards other human beings. And when we lump them together, they end up as this amalgam of bad ideas. And so we say other people. Oh, people suck.
Yeah.
And that just means that our idea that we think someone else is embodied sucks. And we ended up using it as a shorthand for all of humanity. I think that's what zombies do well, is like we are rallying against this this mob of other humans doing just dumb stuff that we don't think they should be doing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I feel like a good zombie is. And that's what I feel like it represents to some degree. Pardon me. And that's why I think it's a good story device. But you had a different introduction for zombies that I would love to hear, Michael. Why don't you kick that off for us? Like, kicking again. What about a hand chop?
Chop over to me. So yeah, my idea of zombies, and when this topic we were talking about it, or when you sent me it, I was more so thinking like the idea of I hope I get the name right, like the George Romero type zombie, right? Where they're the flesh-eating monsters that, you know, are used in either literature or movies or some type of media. Again, bringing it back to, I guess whenever I'm on, we bring it back to D&D.
Always.
But like using it as that kind of like device for the story and then the settings that you can use zombies in, right? There's the outbreak, there's a small outbreak, and then there's like World War Z or Left 4 Dead or Walking Dead, where like the apocalypse has already happened, and then there's a group of survivors who are trying to survive that zombie attack, I guess you would say.
Have you watched the first 2 episodes of The Last of Us?
I haven't. I have not yet.
After this.
No spoilers for that today.
Good.
That's what I hear. But yeah, I just haven't had the time to do that.
I totally derailed you. Continue. So you're looking at zombies mechanically as a historical like timeline. When do you drop in the zombies? Is it full blown? Is it not? Is it just started? Is there a little bit of apprehension, like suspense versus action versus survival versus what?
And there's so many different like types of zombies throughout literature and the media that it's like, what kind of zombie is it? Is it like a zombie scratch and then you've turned into a zombie, or you're going to turn? Is it the raising of the dead and that's the zombies and there's no way to continue the contamination? You have to get bit and it is exclusively like the saliva or the blood of the zombie that'll get you infected. I think 28 days later there's a scene where blood drips into the eye of somebody and then they begin to start the transformation. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use zombies from that perspective. And then, like I said, how do you treat the survivors? What stage? And how can you use that as a device to tell a creative story, put a spin on it, and then that's kind of like the introduction to my version of what I was thinking of zombies.
Yeah, so I think there is another layer here. And what we've started to see in newer movies like Army of the Dead is like these, and Left 4 Dead, the video game, right? That they did really well was that there's different kinds of zombies.
Yeah.
And then the Army of the Dead is now like, well, there's zombie societies as well as different zombies. And I think that that's going to be a really cool turn because it allows us to personify what we're up against.
Yeah.
And I'm all about that. That's why I go for the corporate mind-numbing example, because that's something I don't like. I've had corporate jobs and they make my brain melt out my ear. And so when I see zombies, I think, oh man, that reminds me of The Office. And I like to personify what's in front of me. And so I thought that they did a really good job in Army of the Dead personifying the zombies by making a society, and they're not verbal, but there is like a king and queen, and then they're creating like new zombies. Like the king and queen have been able to get pregnant. They end up losing the baby. Spoiler alert.
Starting off strong, but more spoiler alerts.
People only come here for spoiler alerts and profanity.
Yeah.
So I feel like the different types of zombies and the zombie societies are a new twist that we've seen in the last maybe like 10 or 15 years of zombies that I think is really cool. And I think it allows for a lot of different storytelling. And that's like what we're seeing with The Last of Us. Spoiler alert, but not a lot. Have you played the game?
I have played a little of the game and I have a general idea of what it's about.
So essentially, they've got like sonar zombies. Like they can't see, but they can hear, and they click. And it's so it's super scary if you're playing the game by yourself. I did. It was at night. It was a terrifying game, right?
Yeah.
And they have them in the show too. It works just as well on screen. And so
Nice.
They've added a lot of different tropes that allow for good storytelling. And what I think is cool about zombie stories is that you can tell a lot of just crazy, super deep, emotional human stories because you've thrown out the trope of zombies. And this is not a zombie movie, so I'm immediately breaking the rule, but I just rewatched Signs.
Yeah.
And it's such a good movie about grief. But the real point of the movie is there's aliens that have landed on Earth and are going to attack. But the real story, the meat and potatoes of the movie is the dude lost his wife. Spoiler alert for Signs. So I'm going to quit repeating that now. So anyway, he loses his wife and there's all this grief that has gone through this ex-pastor, and he's past that anger and resentment of a former pastor, right? So he's even given up his religion. He's started to just destroy his family. The anger is overtaking everything. And then he finally maybe not comes to terms with it, but because he's facing death, he's forced to relive it and realize what he's doing to his family. That's the meat and potatoes of Signs. But Signs is like a sort of scary M. Night Shyamalan movie, and it's about aliens.
Yeah. But I still think like the zombie trope is there because it's this thing that's like closing in throughout the whole movie. And that's what zombies tend to do, right? They close you in. Then you start realizing, maybe not in every zombie scenario, but in, ideas of like The Walking Dead, right? They start to understand what is really valuable. Are the things I had valuable? What resources are valuable? Are people valuable? How do I value other people? What do they bring to the table? You really start to see that. And I guess in that family dynamic, it's like, I can't remember who's all there, like daughter, brother, whatever, but you start valuing them even more because this impending doom is slowly like closing on their house.
Yeah. I feel like it gives you, so there's a couple of things that are built into zombie stories. If we're talking about tropes, there is always going to be the ticking time clock, which they talk about I took a script writing class in college, several in fact. They always talk about how to make your script more exciting. And one of the ways is to add a ticking time clock. Like there's a deadline. Well, zombies are their own deadline. Every, resources become their own clock in a zombie story. And then zombies themselves become their own clock. Sound becomes a new stopwatch, basically. You ring the gong and then, you've got 30 seconds to get out. And so that is a trope. There's also like a really easy way to kill other people. So if you're trying to build a villain, or you're trying to build in betrayal into your story, zombies are a great way to do it because nobody is going to do a post-mortem on a zombie, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's built in. If nobody's around, you give them a little push and you take off.
Yeah.
You're done. The other thing that's built into zombie stories is basically like a slow and painful loss of a loved one or a beloved character, where it's the notable exception is Glenn in Walking Dead.
Yeah, but that wasn't even to zombies, but most of the zombie deaths, like kind of, I want to say like season 4 or 5, when they're like going out and about, you see like new characters, you start to build a connection with them, and there are some zombie deaths that you see that betrayal happen, but it's like a slow death that you have to watch, and you see this person was thinking just about themselves, and there was a betrayal that happened, and then this kid ends up dying unnecessarily just because another person is trying to live. And it's sad, seeing the zombie deaths of characters you like are sad. And I think that's what The Walking Dead did initially good, was like all characters are able to die. And that is something that I like, that's kind of getting outside of the trope of zombies. That's something I personally like. There's the risk that all characters can die. That's why I liked Game of Thrones. But kind of going back to the zombies, like zombies don't care at all. They just go for whoever's there based off of those that ticking clock.
And everybody is always under the tension of having less of everything. And I think it allows for, and one of the reasons it makes for really human stories is because there is that tension. You have to bring intensity to all of your interactions. Like not every time you meet somebody out in the woods are you going to draw your gun, but sometimes you will, like just as an introduction. And something that struck me, this is kind of random, but it just popped in my head. I've been watching the documentary on the Beatles on Disney Plus. Nice. Not sponsored. Get Back is what it's called. Anyway, so I'm on like halfway through episode 2. And from the looks of it, this is right before the Beatles broke up. And they just happened to be filming for their rooftop show. Anyway, so they've got all these days of footage of them basically arguing, and it's like it's right before the band broke up, and they've known each other their whole adult lives at this point, which is probably like 10 or 15 years, I think. They're pretty young. And so just because it is 60 years ago now, the intensity and the ease with which they talk about what they feel about each other and what they've been thinking is amazing. I mean, it's almost uncomfortable, because by today's standards, we all have social media. We got something we can hide behind. We're not going to talk about what we think about each other. So just that alone, it's like incredibly intense, but also because the band's about to break up, like they've hit this impasse with each other that they're talking about freely. It's amazing. Anyway, so and very off-putting, like I said, for somebody now looking at it with the advent of talking to most people I talk to through my phone. It's really intense to watch. And that's what's great about zombie movies, right? Is that we can kind of throw back to these really intense emotional times where people are sharing the things that are of utmost importance to them. In every interaction. And it's like, every movie you've ever seen, zombie movie, it's like somebody steals a resource from someone when they're not looking, like they set something down and they just grab it and go, because it's something they needed, And I think the coolest, did you say you had played The Last of Us or not?
I did not play it. Okay,
I'll try not to spoil anything, but it's a dad who loses his daughter and then meets a girl in this post-apocalyptic world. Most basic sense. There's very little dialogue in that game. But because of the times that there is dialogue and the little bits of fun or panic, fun that the guy and that girl have together, just like playing and stuff as a kid and a dad would, or like when there's a loud noise and she's off by herself and him freaking out. It's like just from those little moments, because death is always a possibility, we see this intense and wonderful relationship building between two characters. And it's because of the stakes in some regard, but it also is without any interaction from zombies. I think like the character building portion of the game has like the least amount of zombies. It's the least amount of action, which it kind of should be, right? Like you're allowed to focus on your caring of the other person. And it's a beautiful thing. It's quiet. And I don't think they'd be able to tell that story if it were just like, we're behind enemy lines in World War II Germany, like every video game ever, in the early 2000s, right? I don't think that same setting would work. I don't think like vampires would work. I don't think, because there's a time component to vampires. It's like if you're out during the day and the sun's around, you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But so I think zombies allow for really quiet, introspective storytelling about how we can impact other people without really doing anything. And I think that that's a really powerful thing and a really cool thing that the idea of zombies gives us, because we have this whole life that we live, and especially with the advent of technology, which I've ranted about enough, we live it isolated for the most part. And we can still impact other people in our silence, and even being away from them through our text messages. We can still have great impacts on other human beings. And we still matter when we're not talking. And I think that that's such a cool thing that zombie stories allow us to easily jump into. So if you're going to start a story, like, that's an easy way to jump in and tell something that's on the surface maybe less important. Like if you gave me a video game and said, this is a story about a dad and a daughter, and they get really close, I would say that's probably not a very good video game,
right?
Or a book I really want to read, but we can get people to have really impactful emotional moments because we sort of blindside them by other things.
Yeah. I think what like zombie tropes do well is like those times when people have their adrenaline rushing the most is when you see people bond together, right? That's why, football players, from my experience, right? I only did high school sports, but even in martial arts, right? The guys that you're sparring with and, kind of like going to war with each other, your adrenaline's pumping. You're not thinking, you've got each other's back. And that's where the bond is created. In zombie stereotypes in literature, you can use that as, that bonding experience of like, okay, I got your back. Like, go. We're rushing, we're going. And then it's like, we got through that together, and you start building that bond, and then you can start building a relationship in those kind of more quiet moments. And I think that's something that I see a lot of is like why you bond with people at work is because you go through crap with them, and then you face adversity with them, and then you get through it. For the most part, I think for me, repping FedEx right now, like that's what I experienced at FedEx with my homies, was like we experienced, a hard day, trying to push it as hard as we can, our physical bodies, that our adrenaline was just pumping. And then it's like, we got through this. At the end of the day, the zombies in that scenario would be everyone's packages, and getting them out on time, and making sure we didn't miss anything. And so like trying to keep your adrenaline level, your mind sharp at that level creates a bonding experience. And you can use that in any zombie trope to continue to bond those characters.
Well, it's a clarity of purpose as well, right? So suddenly, if there is a character that's going to betray the group, they see it. They catch their first glimpse in a high adrenaline environment. It's sort of like LeBron James, when everybody was hating on him. It was because he was showboating and he was making it about himself, right? It was like, I don't need to be on the same team. Even I can be with anybody. They're all interchangeable. This is about me. This is the LeBron show. Right. And, in those adrenaline fueled moments that came out, and it was like, I'm sure in practice, he's not like practicing his free throw going, hey, this is all about me. Pass me that ball. Like he's probably just regular human being. But like when the adrenaline started pumping, it was like, okay, this is about me. And I'm worried about my glory right now. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's how he always was, or if that's even true, but that's the example I'm going to use. So, so I think we get this crucible, but this wonderful catalyst moment when you're running from zombies or any monster, but zombies today.
Yeah.
That you get to see what people care about the most. And that's, like I said, that dad being afraid in The Last of Us. It was like, there is obviously death this way, but he's going to go save that kid anyway.
Yeah.
And that says a lot about his character. And it's almost as good as him saving some sort of beloved pet. In terms of storytelling, right?
Would have been better. Yeah. I was playing.
Like anytime a dog dies in a movie, it's the most heartbreaking thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't feel that way, but I feel like other people do. Anytime there's a dog, I'm like, maybe it's because of the script writing classes, but I feel like as soon as a dog dies, I'm like really wary that this is not going to be a good movie or book or whatever it is, because it's like, okay, well, that's like a lazy way to make me care about this character.
Yeah,
so
gotcha.
What's next?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. But I think it was I Am Legend, where that was a really good zombie movie too.
Yeah, it kind of introduces some of those elements that we were talking about, and there is kind of like a day and night feature where I think they can go out during the day, and that's when they're safe, and that's when they can have a lot of it
at night.
Say again?
Oh, you're saying Will Smith and the dog.
Will Smith. Yeah. And the dog can like go out during the day, and that's, you know, why you care about the dog, because you can see that Will Smith is using I haven't watched the movie in a long time. The dog is helping Will Smith. Will Smith is caring for the dog. And then at night, it's kind of like
only positive companionship in all the world. He's by himself completely.
Right. And then there is also that the ticking time bomb element where it's like, if they make noise at night, then I believe like the zombies will like come and get him, or like he's hidden or something. I can't remember.
Well, they just had that. It was like he found in hunting one time, like he found a smarter zombie. It's like the zombie leader, again, personifying what he's up against, which is super cool. But it's like it was just smart enough to follow him home, more or less. Gotcha. I haven't seen it in a long time either, but I'm sure there's some other parts. But that it follows him home, and basically his dog sacrifices himself, and then he sacrifices himself for the woman and child who are trying to get to safety and save the world. Right. That was such a good movie. I got to rewatch that.
I know it was a really good movie.
And the zombie that was like intelligent seemed really vindictive, which was interesting because they made it seem like it was smart enough to really know what was going on and be able to figure out the puzzles, but it also seemed like it resented him. I can't remember why, if it was like maybe he killed a zombie and the smart one saw it or something, but it was like
something like that.
Like he resented him and he wanted to, it didn't even seem like he wanted to kill him. It's like he wanted him to be a zombie, which I thought was, maybe that's something I'm bringing to the story because I don't think they ever really went into it, but I just enjoyed that was maybe even a question. That was pretty cool. It was almost like tribalism by conquer, I guess, sort of like the Roman Empire back in the day, that it's everything we take over is now us. And anyway, just another interesting idea in a zombie film.
Yeah.
Zombie flick. So if you were to create a story, this is the final question of the episode. This is get it right or we sign off immediately.
Oh, no.
No. So if you were to create a story, what would it take for you to justify using zombies? Like, you don't strike me as somebody that's like, zombies is my favorite genre, I'm going to use zombies immediately. What would it take for you to be introduced to a story that says, I want to write this in a zombie setting? What do you feel like justifies that?
I mean, again, you're talking about like me personally. That's not necessarily my. I mean, I could see myself going down and writing an element of a story that incorporates this thought of mindless evil creatures coming to attack something. And I think that's what I said like earlier was this is a good trope to use when you need just something evil, right? So not necessarily in a story, potentially in a story, but in like D&D, right? I wouldn't always use something mindlessly evil because that's not fun for me, right? I like to create a villain like we talked about in the previous episode. I like to create interesting villains, right? That can potentially be reoccurring, something to create tension. But if I needed to, zombies are just something that can be kind of easy for characters to go up against because there's no morality that they have to face with the zombies, right? You can just kill it and there's no real questions about it because you're trying to survive. It's already dead. And I think that
like it's irredeemable, basically.
Yeah, you can't. Different tropes like they look for the zombie cure and they've never found the zombie cure, right? So you'll see early on people will try and experiment with like, oh, maybe they're a person, right? I think again, going back to The Walking Dead, there's a scene real early where I think it's Morgan that saves Rick, and when he's looking out of his house, he sees his wife as a zombie. He's like, I can't kill her because that's my wife. And so eventually they get to the point where it's just a zombie. It's not your wife. It's just a person. There's no morality behind it. Your wife is already dead. They're already gone. And so to use it, would be this sense of there's nothing wrong to do if you kill it. You haven't done anything morally wrong. Walking Dead definitely tackles that over and over and over again. But also, like you said, like that ticking time bomb I could use as kind of like a swarm mentality. You hit this trigger and then it's like something coming at you with overwhelming odds, almost like the 28 Days Later zombies, right? The sprinter zombies, where they're just going. They're running at you as fast as you can. So that like creates a story where the character doesn't have time to make good decisions. They have to make fast decisions. And I guess not necessarily not good, but not thought out. They have to really rely on their reactions, what they already know of the world. And you have seconds, milliseconds to make these decisions. Am I going to take a right? Am I going to take a left? Am I going to go straight? Are the zombies distracted by sound? How can I use sound? I need to be quiet, but I've been running, so I got to quiet my breath. And, there's a lot of challenges that go with the zombie horde coming at you, or just a handful of zombies coming at you. I actually ran a game just like a Star Wars one shot, and I introduced zombies as part of the heist, unbeknownst to my characters. But it was Halloween. You got to have zombies, right? And those were the challenges that I pushed them, was how to be quiet and also how to use noise as a distraction. There were people they interacted with earlier in the session who had then turned into a zombie. There was so that element of like surprise, you better hurry up. There is a time bomb because in my mind it's Star Wars, right? So they're not going to risk letting any of the zombies get out. So I was like, you can see like ships are about to start bombarding the city. You guys have to find a way out now. And like putting that tension onto the players or onto the characters that you're writing about or writing your story about. So a couple different ways how I would use it. It would be tough to use by itself without having to have interpersonal, what's the word? Like interpersonal challenges, right, and obstacles. And that, again, Walking Dead's probably the biggest example of, Shane and Rick, they have this tension between each other. And then you have to start going to a lot more personal tensions and, who do they need to survive? What are their best chances for survival, and so on and so forth. But there's still that ever present threat of zombies.
Like, it's almost an atmosphere, like if you said it's raining in my story, it's almost like that, where it's like, yeah, there's a downpour, yeah, there's a thunderstorm, you got to worry about the obvious things, but it's not going to shape your story in a meaningful way. I mean, it may, but
I think that's where you have to get creative about it, and that's where, I feel like the plot armor kind of lost it for me. There was plot armor for this character, plot armor for this character, plot armor for this character. And you're like, okay, so the risk that was there isn't there anymore.
Yeah. The reason I stopped watching The Walking Dead was because Daryl didn't become a leader in the group. And it doesn't make any sense the way that they were structuring themselves early on. Like you said, there's sort of this shapeless blob going through different groups and destroying them, and sort of like keeping the most powerful, and then everything else be damned, or like the things that they can use the most. And it's like Daryl is the one that is most suited to survive. And he's the one with sort of the strongest convictions. It's like Rick is a good spokesperson early on, and he also has a gun and the sheriff's outfit, whatever. So like at the beginning, it makes sense for him to be leading, and then round about season 4 or 5, it's like, well, Daryl is the one that's providing the most for the group. So it would make sense that they'd start gravitating towards him. And when that didn't happen, I decided I was right, and I stopped watching.
Yeah, I think that also goes into a discussion about leadership and how not everyone is equipped for leadership, but some people need to step up, which is another thing you can bring up in your story is, should he have been a leader? I think he does become a leader later on, but that doesn't pay off until way later, I believe.
I guess I got to start watching.
Like I said, I stopped watching. But there is definitely an idea of people having to step up to leadership because they are the only ones, right? There is no other person to lead, and so they have to take that step. I think in certain situations, Daryl does become a leader, right? Or whoever your Daryl is for your story, right? They can become the leader for a time, for a moment, a leader of a small group, right? Or like a squad. I can't think of the right word, but like a small group of people going somewhere. You can see like your most skilled person would be not necessarily fit for leadership, but they are a leader of a small group. And I think, the leader has to kind of figure out where that person fits into the organization. But that's a different topic than zombies. But you can fit that trope of like the call to leadership, the pushing away of leadership, and what effects that would cause. If Daryl was a leader for The Walking Dead, how would that have changed the course of the show? What if, I don't remember all the characters' names anymore, but what if, a different character stepped up? What happens to the leadership? What happens to the group that's trying to survive the zombie outbreak?
I think for me, it comes down to, if I'm going to answer the same question, which is, when would I use zombies? I think for me, it comes down to if I want to seclude my characters and remove them from the real world and sort of like put them in a test tube and see how it goes. That's when I feel like I would use it. Or if I have a really good story, but it doesn't have enough suspense or action to really push it over the goalpost, then I would consider throwing in zombies or some other like but it's always, to me, zombies are always happening outside of the story. It's like you see, let's say you write a 300-page book, you're going to run into maybe 15 zombies, and one of those is going to be really close, maybe two.
Yeah.
And the rest of them are just like you sort of bounce off of them as you go through the story. And everything else is going to be about your characters.
And I think the last thing I would say is if like you're playing a game, like a role-playing game or in a story, zombies could be a source of resource depletion, and then having your characters figure out how to manage their resources post a zombie attack. Because, right, you know, again, that's another thing in Walking Dead. Like, do you use a bullet? Do you use a sword? Do you go hand to hand? Do you not? And what are the risks involved with that? Is it worth using a bullet and creating more noise and drawing more walkers? Is it worth using a sword, katana, axe, knife, and potentially getting bit and infected? So, you know, kind of that challenge of resource management, I think, would be another use of that if you're talking about like a role-playing game or any type of resource management for your characters, if that's what you're keeping track of in your story.
I think that's a good one because it goes... Basically, we've all seen the march of progress forward. We can look back at history and see that we've moved from, you know, tribalism to where we're at now. But we don't get a chance to look at very often in history, sort of the people that are reduced back to tribalism are pretty much just left where they're at. We don't see too much information on that. But the zombie stories allow us to see somebody go from industrial to tribal and see how and that's a good thought, that you get to see how meaningless a laptop is post-apocalyptic, you know.
I think of a level in Left 4 Dead 2. I think they're in like a mall and they're trying to get survivors out of the mall, or they have to go through it to get a car, right, so they can travel. They're not looting anything, right? They're just focused on ammo, weapons, killing the zombies, but mainly surviving and getting a car to go from one location to the other. And yeah, they have to manage their resources throughout that. Just like in a video game, whenever you're like, oh, dang, I'm low on ammo, like, do I use my primary or secondary? So it's a lot of challenges that the zombies bring.
There was one video game that was right before Zombie Island, and I can't remember what it was. It was basically the whole game was set around this mall, and you had to, like, it was like a heist or something. So like you had to turn on the power in order to get the vault open in order to steal what was inside. And there was this fun moment in it where, you know, you can use anything in there as a weapon. So you end up with like a weed whacker or something, and you're in the middle like courtyard of the mall, and there's like this mechanical clown was their equivalent of like a Build-A-Bear. And there's a mechanical clown like over you, just like waving as you're in the middle of this room, just like weed whacking a room full of zombies. And it's like just the juxtaposition of like, we thought that was necessary,
right?
It's just super interesting. There's a good way to hold a mirror to, this is what we find important now, and here's why it maybe isn't, but it's definitely worth considering whether it is or isn't, you know. I think that's another good note for a good zombie story. I hope you found something useful about zombies and when to use them on today's podcast of the same name. This was the Creative Thinker Podcast. Thank you, Michael, for coming on.
Once again, having me.
Very much appreciated, crowd favorite. Creative thinkers all over the world, thanks for tuning in once again. Take care. Bye-bye.